Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Radio Squid for the Nintendo Switch. And I gotta say, at first glance, I was totally drawn to this game. I was having flashbacks of Gato Roboto and a couple other monochrome games, but if you're in the same boat just looking at the eShop, definitely stick around for the review. Starting off with the story, Radio Squid is actually based on kind of a unique premise. More or less, you're playing as a squid who is apparently the foreman of some undersea digging crew who have accidentally discovered the Song of the Siren. The Siren song, of course, being a cursed melody, and now that you, as the little squid, have been cursed, you'll have to pilot your way down all the way to the seafloor to see if you can have it removed. How this works out in the actual gameplay, though, is with Squid Radio being an arcade-style room-to-room bullet hell shooter. Every single room that you enter will be one step closer to your path to the ocean floor, and you'll have to activate the Siren song to be able to start blasting apart any enemies in your way. So in that sense, the Siren song is not only your curse, but really your only way to get it removed. And so while that is pretty darn circular, it makes for a unique game concept. And with multiple rooms to navigate through in each of the game's 24 levels, it does actually provide about, unfortunately, only an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours of gameplay. But that is only considering that you're able to hang with the challenge, because this little game is pretty darn tough for a couple of reasons. Every single room that you enter is going to have several different enemies with different types of attack styles. And as I mentioned before, you'll actually have to activate the Song of the Siren before you can even enter into combat. And though it may not completely wreck your brain, even if you're not really familiar with arcade-style gaming, the vanishing edges at all of the corners of the game are used to be able to navigate your character around the screen. But where the game gets really difficult is that enemy fire and your own fire will need to be sometimes launched out of the visible areas of the screen to take advantage of some certain enemy placement. Every single enemy in the game does have its own completely unique attacks, and since our little Squid Billy can only fire in 4 directions, there are certain positions in the screen that'll have much larger advantages when trying to confront them. And so, in a sense, each room-style confrontation area actually kind of works itself out almost like a puzzle game. You'll have to have both quick reflexes and a quick read on the screen to see which enemies you should be attacking first to make sure you're not hitting yourself with your own, yes, friendly fire. As I mentioned before, your little Magellan bullets can completely circumnavigate the screen, but if they do hit a wall, they're going to reflect back just as far as they were shot. They do eventually turn red and dissipate once they've made about a full path across the entire screen. But as you can completely litter the screen with your own rounds as well as enemy fire, one of the most difficult things is actually just avoiding your own shots. But thankfully this game isn't a true roguelike in the fact that once you die you start over. Not only do you have a save point at the end of each gaming world, but you also get to respawn with a pseudo-continue based on how many coins you have. And while you will need to save all the coins you can to hopefully appease the siren and remove your curse at the end of the game, you'll also need your coins to potentially buy upgrades at the end of each world, as well as respawn you should you take too much damage. But while this does seem to be a pretty forgiving system for the player, it's actually a little more intense than you'd expect. Killing any enemies in the game will net you a coin, and you can use your special bomb ability to momentarily turn every single projectile in the screen into a coin. And while this little mechanic would seem pretty advantageous for making a quick buck, if you do die, you're going to sacrifice 80% of your coins for whatever total you're currently working with in order to get the chance to keep playing. And as you may have guessed, the boss fights at the end of each world are going to be a real big cash sponge. You will probably die once or twice, at least your first time challenging each boss, which means there goes all of the cash and currency you may have saved up to buy those upgrades to help you not die so often later. But moving on from the game's general mechanics, looking at its visuals and audio, the game has a pretty epic draw for nostalgic gamers. Despite being a monochromatic game, the visuals are actually really easy on the eyes. And as this is a rhythm-based game, as you might expect, the soundtrack is pretty darn good. But moving into the game's critiques, there are a few things the player might want to know about before diving into Radio Squid. First off, and as I've already really mentioned before, the friendly fire paired with ricocheting shots all synced up to a beat that is, in all honesty, pretty hard to predict. Well, to be painfully honest, it doesn't really create a very organic or intuitive combat system for the game. Your firing does speed up with quicker rhythms and slows down with others, and even has certain pauses when tracks are changing, And while that does seem like a pretty cool mechanic, it just doesn't really work out in a very satisfying way for the player. Because you're constantly focused on your own shots, on enemy fire, on enemy placement, it's really, really difficult to concentrate on when the next beat in an ever-changing track is going to come up. And if you are the type of player that memorizes how many shots an enemy needs to take down, such as 3 for this one or 4 for that one, and you're just trying to count them off, well, a momentary change in the beats are really going to throw you out of sync. Other than that, a potential note of critique is the fact that each of the room combat areas in Radio Squid is actually really small. And this does mean that you'll get pushed right up next to enemies that do damage on contact, and you'll be maneuvering in and out of really tight spaces that are always going to be ricocheting your own shots back at you. And last, but certainly not least, depending on what type of gamer you are, even with the game's potentially long learning curve, the entire event only lasts between 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours. And so while Radio Squid isn't particularly expensive, and it does provide a pretty good challenge on a good premise, depending on what you're looking for out of the game, it might not be the most satisfying experience. If you're the type of gamer who enjoys retro gaming because it's a nice little slow walk down memory lane, then the kind of hectic mechanics adding to the difficulty level might be not what you're looking for. But if you were that type of gamer who finds themselves drawn to those punishing games like really technical platformers, or even finds a sort of cult level satisfaction with games that's mechanics are just a little too difficult for what they should be, then you'd probably have a great time with Radio Squid. Because in all honesty, it can be a pretty fun game, it's just probably not meant for a really broad gaming audience. But that about does wrap up the review for Radio Squid now on the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw me a like or a comment to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. As you can see, there are new and unique indie games coming out literally every single day, and if it's on the eShop, whether it's an easy hard pass or an unforgettable gem, chances are you're going to find out about it right here. But if you really enjoy the content and you love the fact that this channel is devoted to giving some much needed media coverage to some really underrepresented titles and some underrepresented developers, I'd be happy to welcome your support as one of our new Patreons. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.